Hello and welcome everyone to the live stream. I'm your host Stefan Burns, geophysicist, geologist, space weather guy. There's a lot happening right now. Because I look at all these different things, solar activity, space weather, earthquakes, volcanic events, and more. Also examine interstellar forces, comets, all these things. There is a big convergence of factors taking place over the next 10 days between solar storm impacts, between very unusual earthquake swarming in Japan, extremely similar to what occurred directly before the magnitude 9.1 Great Tohoku Earthquake in March of 2011. You also have a extremely precise linear planetary alignment between the Sun, Mercury, the Moon, Earth, and Uranus. So this goes all the way from the center of our solar system out to 20 astronomical units involving the Earth and its Moon, which is one of the main agents of tidal forces, both ocean tides and Earth tides, vertical displacement of the Earth on the planet. And these solar storm impacts, these solar flares, there's a ton happening. So I am getting actually pretty worried about what's happening with Japan because this earthquake swarm has not stopped and we are getting new solar flares. Each of these explosions charging up the global electric circuit by blasting the Earth with its high frequency light radiation, extreme ultraviolet light, X-ray light, the same sort of X-rays that you receive at the doctor's office. The doctor says, oh, it's fine, but then they hide behind the wall, right? It's the same frequency of light, except a huge, massive amount of it that the sun will blast off. Light travels in a straight line, unaffected by electromagnetic fields. It's creating these electromagnetic fields, basically. And that hits the Earth 8.3 minutes later, charges up the atmosphere where it hits by causing molecules to break apart, ionization. Therefore, we have an ionosphere, the uppermost part of our atmosphere. This creates really strong electric currents. Then, if it launches a coronal mass ejection like both of these flares have, the first one at this video is for the 9th of November. Yesterday, that is a 1.7 X class flare. This one right there, and then the one that happened just a few hours ago is a 1.2 X class flare. That launched an even bigger coronal mass ejection out of space. Sometimes they launch plasma outwards. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. Those take longer to reach Earth, about, let's say, 24, 48, 72 hours. It depends on the velocity. Both of these are expected to come in on the 12th of November. So we already are having the global electric circuit get charged up. We've already had some long duration geomagnetic storming. We have a pretty big impact coming in. I'm expecting G3 levels minimum. That would be a strong geomagnetic storm. So we can see here with our scale rating, 1 is minor, 2 is moderate, 3 is strong. We could even get to severe levels. I don't think we're going to go extreme with these impacts, but you never know. But probably G3 minimum, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have G4 storming. This does bring into question issues with the power grids and satellites and radio communication and more. But one of the reasons why that happens is because of these really strong geomagnetically induced currents that get created by that ionization of the ionosphere, and that's how the global electric circuit charges. You get these electric currents that flow in the upper atmosphere and induce currents to flow in the ground surface or anything that's conductive. So in this case, like transmission lines, but in the case of earthquakes, it's the actual Earth itself hosting these really powerful electric currents, which can, well, maybe cause a fault to rupture. There's quite a bit of evidence for that, in fact. So we've now had 2 big X-class flares exactly from Earth direct with solar storms coming in. Let's check out our coronagraph imagery so we can see this happen. Look at this. This is our 24-hour coronagraph imagery. Look at that perfect full halo solar storm headed inbound quickly too. The one from the 1.7 X-class flare was not as nice looking as this. It wasn't as fast. So I think this is going to catch up to the one that was launched yesterday. They're going to sandwich together and then probably sweep by the Earth around the 12th of November. Sometime the 12th. Maybe pushes out to the 13th. I think it's going to be the 12th. And then you have this planetary alignment that's forming very rapidly. And that is a big concern because we see these sort of enhanced energetic events on the planet during significant planetary alignments. This is one of the most significant ones we've had in a while. We have an even bigger one coming up in January of 2026, but this is definitely one to watch. So let me show you that. We have our display view here of the solar system, thanks to Solar System Scope, and we zoom out. This is set for today, November 10th. Okay, so here we have the 10th of November, and you'll see, maybe if I move over here, this will be better. We see Earth, the Moon, Mercury, the Sun, and then behind the Earth, we have Uranus. So we're approaching our annual Uranus opposition, where it's Sun, Earth, Uranus. Well, look what happens if I just zoom forward a little bit. I'm just going to drag this right to about the 19th, 20th of November. Look at that. All of a sudden, we have the Sun, Mercury, Moon, Earth, and Uranus in a line. And there's people that have been doing research on this for a long time now. One notable researcher, his name is J.H. Nelson. He was really looking into planetary alignments as it affected solar activity, sunspot formation, geomagnetic storming, and radio frequency communication back in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Because back then they didn't have a lot of the space weather tools that we have now, all the satellites and more. So he was like working for RCA, and they're like, you need to figure out some way to be able to forecast when we could get disturbances. And he took it upon himself and noticed very strong correlations between planetary alignments, sunspot activity, solar flares, and geomagnetic storming. So he wrote a book on this called Cosmic Patterns. It's a short read. I've read through it. I've applied his methodology now to successfully forecast solar activity and geomagnetic storming a few times. We also do tend to see enhanced Earth events around planetary alignments because of electromagnetic gravitational forces and perhaps even more like morphic resonance forces at play. But right here on the 19th and 20th, this is our new moon, and we have our Uranus opposition, and this is a Mercury retrograde because we had Mercury go retrograde on the 9th. From the perspective of Earth, Mercury is now moving backwards, so we get the inferior conjunction of Mercury on the 19th, 20th of November. So new moon, inferior conjunction of Mercury, and Uranus opposition all together, boom, on the 19th and 20th, which is looking very dynamic. So this is building, and then this is also in a harmonic configuration, a 60-degree sextile to Saturn, Neptune, as we see here, getting closer and closer to their great conjunction that's coming up. So let's go back to that. So this is a 60-degree angle there, and then we notice that Pluto is also in this 60-degree angle to Saturn, Neptune. So that means that Pluto is 120 degrees trine to this alignment here. And Nelson identified Mercury as being the activator of these alignments because of its fastest orbital velocity around the sun and also because of its proximity to the sun. So it seems that when Mercury sweeps in, that's when these alignments get activated and you get significant events to unfold. So that is a factor that if I wasn't watching would put a damper on everything. Like if you're not aware of the planetary alignments and stuff, what's happening now isn't necessarily extremely unusual or concerning, though the earthquake activity off the coast of Japan is basically regardless. This is just adding like a +5 to everything effectively because we're building up to that. So let's look at our earthquake map from the USGS because I really think that there's a very high likelihood now, like a very high likelihood now of there being a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake in Japan in the next 10 days. I would say if you want to really widen the time frame, because we don't know when something's going to happen or if it's going to happen, let's keep that in mind. Nothing could happen beyond what has happened. But for the rest of this month, because the planetary geometry has a bit of a window on it, but this could happen even sooner than that. This could happen within hours or days. And I don't like making these sort of forecasts, but this is a sort of activity that you see before something really big happens and all the factors are aligning. So here we have what's been happening in Japan. This is set for the 8th of, I believe I set this for the 8th of, November, going all the way up to now. If we set this for earthquakes on the map, we see a 5.2, 7.4, 6.0. Here's this magnitude 6 that just occurred within a few hours. And if we go further down, you'll see a 6.4. Here's a 6.4 that occurred yesterday and a 6.8 that occurred yesterday. During that time frame, we've had those three big X-class or those two big X-class flares, the 1.7 and the 1.2, both of them launching solar storms our way. And actually this 1.2 X-class flare from today has triggered an S1 proton radiation storm. So we already have high energy particles flowing in from the solar wind from that explosion, charging up the ionosphere, especially in the polar regions. The auroral circuit and everything is really getting supercharged right now. And then those electric currents kind of bleed out to the equator and to the lower latitude regions on our planet. So we have an S1 proton radiation storm, multiple solar storm impacts coming in, really significant planetary alignment coming up November 19th and 20th. And we have this earthquake swarm, which is extremely reminiscent of what occurred directly before the magnitude 9.1 Great Tohoku Earthquake, March 11th of 2011. That was at 5:46 a.m. And that was defined primarily by a magnitude 7.3 foreshock, but also a ton of other things like this. I counted up the magnitude 5s. I think this one right here, maybe I haven't accounted for because it just came in. But when I counted, there have been 22 magnitude 5 earthquakes or greater in this location. That's not accounting for the magnitude 6s. So 3 magnitude 6 earthquakes now, a 6.8, 6.4, and 6. 22 magnitude 5 or greater, so 5.0 to 5.9, and then tons of 4s, even more 3s, even more 2s. This is exceptionally anomalous and not normal, and is very much indicative of this being a foreshock sequence to something big, and probably not just a magnitude 7 something, 7.0, 7.9. If we were to get a magnitude 7.5, let's say, I would even say that's probably still part of the foreshock. This really is looking like a Megaquake earthquake foreshock sequence where magnitude 8 or greater. Great Tohoku Earthquake, magnitude 9.1. So this is really, really significant, and I hope my forecast is wrong, but I think that is probably actually the most likely outcome. It's the majority percentage. If I had to base percentages, I say that there's more than a 50% chance right now of this being something, heralding something really big coming to Japan, which is something to be aware of, because the Great Tohoku Earthquake, that epicenter was right here. And then this entire area, in fact, for the months afterwards, experienced extreme seismic activity. So it's almost in the exact same location, super close to the coast of Japan. And also these earthquakes, if I set this for largest magnitude, you'll notice they are shallow in depth, 10.0, 10.0, 11.2. So you need a shallow, big earthquake to create a significant tsunami. If this was, let's say, a magnitude 8 earthquake that occurs at 300 kilometers of depth, and sometimes we get these really big, deep earthquakes, it's actually an energy explosion underground. If that was to occur, you're not going to get a tsunami from that. It's too deep. But if you have it really close to the surface, that allows the actual geologic layers, slip and break, and you either get this uplift or downlift, and that pushes the water to create that tsunami wave. And because it's happening so close to the coast, it's going to hit almost instantly if it does. So this is really, really looking significant, and this magnitude 6 that came in today only further strengthens that forecast, because this is already looking pretty troubling there, and then we continue to have magnitude 5s. Now we have this magnitude 6, and yes, it is right now going 6.8, 6.4, and 6. So there is a decay function to this, but typically it's 1 order of magnitude less for the aftershocks. So a 6.8 being the big earthquake would mean that the highest aftershock typically would be magnitude 5.8, 5.9, or 6. But this is a 6.4 or 6.8, 6.4, and 6 with 22 or more magnitude 5 earthquakes. They keep popping off. It's like a magnitude 4 plus every hour or so, sometimes even greater than that. So that's the other thing. There's such a huge number of these magnitude 5s. That's very anomalous. And if we go up here, Kamchatka is the site of the greatest earthquake we've had this year, the 6th strongest ever observed with modern seismic gear, a magnitude 8.8 megaquake. There's been a ton of magnitude 7s, 6s, and 5s here. It's still swarming effectively, though that has died off a little bit just in the past few days. But all the seismic energy release has been loading this zone, because you have the fault rupture or faults rupture and you have this actual displacement wave, right? This sound wave. A seismic wave is a sound wave. So the particles are either compressing together like this, or they're shearing like this, or you get this rolling surface wave motion. That is actually loading energy into molecular structures and into fault zones. So when you have a rupture on a fault, and for the magnitude 8.8, it was like nearly this entire section ruptured there, which makes sense because it's a big earthquake, right? Sixth largest ever observed. There was a magnitude 9 here in 1952, by the way. So 1952 magnitude 9, 2025 magnitude 8.8. Well, this area gets ruptured. These zones here go into earthquake shadow because they also have a lot of stress taken off of them. The areas outside that earthquake shadow actually get loaded with energy. So this area has been loaded with a ton of energy since July, when this earthquake activity started, that magnitude 8.8 being July 29th. And in fact, we forecasted that on the channel here 3 days in advance. We were looking at overall global earthquake trends paired with space weather, because there's really strong connection between them based off of my research. You can do your own research if you want. Just, yeah. And then I was saying, hey, we're likely due for a megaquake in 2025, like a few months in advance. I started releasing some videos occasionally on that risk factor because we hadn't had a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake for 4 years. Typically, we get one every single year. And then 3 days before this occurred, the magnitude 8.8, I released a video examining the highest risk seismic zones for the near future. And this is the first zone identified because it was the highest risk of all of them. And I specifically said it is possible that we get a magnitude 8.5 or greater there in the near future. And then 3 days later, the 29th of July, we did. So we've been doing some accurate earthquake forecasting here by looking at all these factors. Again, the actual earthquake activity is really important. Then you add in the space weather and solar factors and the planetary alignments, and you really get some pretty incredible results. There's also an antipodal action happening. So one of the new developments, I've said this before, but this right here, Kamchatka, the antipode, the exact opposite side of the globe for that is right about here. And we've been getting a lot of earthquakes here in the Scotia Sea, magnitude 7s. We've had a 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, and they've been going back and forth like this. So it's been a reciprocal, almost like ping pong, ping pong, ping pong with these earthquakes. Well, if you look, Kamchatka is not that far from Japan, which means that its antipode is in pretty much the same location. So its antipode is more about over here, roughly this zone. So the two areas of greatest seismic energy release thus far in 2025, which would be Kamchatka and the Scotia Sea right here, are nearly exactly antipodal. And what's happening with Japan right now is not that far off of it. This isn't like Papua New Guinea or something. This is really close to Kamchatka, so its antipode is pretty much in the same location. There's some larger force factor at play here related to probably the core and the mantle, and at that core mantle boundary and going up to the surface, that's influencing this axis of seismic activity through the Earth itself from here to there. And that's another reason why I think that we could get something really big here, because this is right in that zone. It's been loaded with all that energy, and we have these solar storm impacts coming in. So here we can look at our latest space weather model for the 1.2 X-class flare that just came in. This was just released. We see this basically a direct impact. High velocity, this comes in on the 12th at 6 a.m. Universal Time according to NASA. And so this is the top-down view. We're looking at the sun. Here's the Earth in yellow. We're looking down on the solar system, okay? Here we see, for example, Venus, Mars. There's Mercury. See how Mercury is moving towards that inferior conjunction, that Sun-Mercury Earth alignment? We often get enhanced activity with earthquakes around that. One of the last inferior conjunctions that happened this year, March 21st to 23rd of 2025, we had Venus and Mercury both simultaneously perform an inferior conjunction. And then just a few days afterwards, we had that magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar, Burma, near Thailand. And so that was the strongest earthquake that we had had at that moment in time since the magnitude 7.8 and 7.5 earthquakes in Turkey back in February 2023. So these alignments, really Mercury is a really big activator here. Now here we're looking at the vertical plane. So this is south, this is north, here's the Earth, there's the sun. We see that this is pretty much aligned with the Earth. It's a direct shot, folks. So that coronal mass ejection that was launched today is a direct shot. I mean, it's going slightly, it's skewed slightly above the ecliptic plane. You see that maybe the bulk of it's more about right here. And then for this angle, we see the bulk of it's more probably right about there. But it's basically a direct shot. And if we look at our CCOR1 coronagraph view, again, it just further confirms that. It is really clearly a direct shot. So here's our coronagraph view one more time. Boom shakalaka. There is that full halo coronal mass ejection launching straight towards us. See these right there? See these other features that are launching? Specifically that first one's really nice. See how it forms like almost like a donut shape right there? Look at that. That's showing the shock wave propagating up to the north. And this one though, we see it differently because it's going right towards us. Now what's interesting about this is that in fact it's headed right towards a comet that we've been tracking that has brightened 250 times. So it's 250 times brighter unexpectedly, and it's exactly in alignment with the sun and the Earth right now. So let me pull that up to show you what I'm talking about. Here we have comet C2025 T1 Atlas, and this was originally down at a apparent magnitude of about -16 or so. And I think it's -16, and yeah, about 16.5, and now it's around 10. So it's about 16.5 to 16 originally. Now it's about 10 to 9.5. And this comet is exactly aligned with the Earth and the sun at this moment in time, where that coronal mass ejection I kind of pointed out, not the one headed towards us, but the one right before it launched out. And we see this connection between comets and solar activity and often earthquakes too. There seems to really be a connection to all this because 3I Atlas is also still very close into the sun, and it's not just a comet or something, it's an interstellar object. It's really, really bizarre. It's been growing its tail very rapidly. Here we can look at that imagery. Here we see the tail on 3I Atlas that's just rapidly developed. It's spewing out multiple jets. This is imagery from the 9th of November. I'll link this in the video description. The astronomer's website for this, and as 3I Atlas moves further away from the sun, it starts to have more of a kind of perpendicular arrangement for our viewing here on Earth. And so maybe this tail was streaming out behind it and we just couldn't see it, but it really seems that it's turned on significantly just in the past couple days. And typically tails take some time to develop. And we weren't really seeing it before it did its superior conjunction with the sun on October 21st and then its perihelion on the 29th. This seems to have rapidly developed, especially the jet activity, which I showed you in a recent video. Here we have our sky live, and so we see the alignment. Here's our comet C2025 T1 Atlas. Look at how right now today, November 10th, it is exactly in line with the sun and the Earth. So you can see it very clearly right here, exactly in that Earth-Sun alignment, though it's well above the ecliptic plane. But again, we had that coronal mass ejection launch off in that direction before this big full halo, and this is brightened 250 times. So it's receiving some amount of energy from the sun. Of course, its perihelion is on the 2nd of December, and that's at a distance of 1.1 astronomical units. So as it gets closer in, it's going to be receiving more solar radiation. These are light photons, but it's also getting some of these solar storms launched towards it clearly, and it increasing in brightness 250 times means that it's now more of a plasma body than it was before. It's ionized to a good degree. It's been releasing gas and dust that ionizes in interplanetary space, and as a result, it forms a very strong electromagnetic field around it. And electromagnetism being so much stronger of a force than gravity, you know, the gravitational significance and influence between the two of these is very minor, especially a comet. It has almost no gravity. But that's the thing, because that's so low gravity, it can really expand out this cloud of gas, dust, and plasma around it, which then can be very powerful as a force in relation to the sun and the overall interplanetary space and field, because typically there's nothing there. all of a sudden you drop effectively a big magnet there, right? To think of this really simply, you have this field of potentials, and then you drop a big magnet in a place that you normally don't have one, it's going to affect things. Because electromagnetism, 10 to 36 times more powerful than gravity. That's so many zeros, right? It's a lot. It's a huge amount, so much more powerful than gravity. Gravity is not irrelevant, but electromagnetism is the dominant guiding force in most things. So again, gravity is not irrelevant, but it's not as important. It's not the only thing, which a lot of mainstream science is like they only think about gravity ever. They never thinking really about electromagnetism and some of these aspects and opening their mind there. A lot of people are. So more and more people are coming online with this understanding of plasma cosmology, which is awesome. And it's both. It's not one or the other. So we have that. We see 3i Atlas is still very close into the sun right here. It's still well within the orbit of Mars. It's going to leave this inner solar system, if we're defining that by the orbit of Mars, at the very end of November. And then it starts its long journey to Jupiter unless it does something bizarre and unexpected. But right now it's growing that tail. We see that we're looking at it slightly off angle. So that tail is mostly pointed away from the Earth. So if you go back here again, keep in mind this tail is stretched out actually kind of at that angle. We're not seeing it perfectly laterally, which means that this is actually quite a bit of a longer tail than a lot of people think. So in a few weeks, if this tail remains, it's going to be quite long, which means that there's a lot of off-gassing here. So it clearly has a lot of volatiles to it, and that means that they're volatilizing very quickly. So ice going straight to gas at hypersonic speeds, carrying dust with it. This is creating a very large plasma field around it, just like the other comets in the solar system, and that's interacting with the Earth from a different angle than the one that I just showed you, T1 Atlas. It's interacting from it. But the thing with 3i Atlas is that it's along the ecliptic plane. So it's right there in the solar wind, in the electric current inward flowing of interplanetary space. And we've seen really clearly how it's been influencing solar activity. At least you can make that argument, because these big sunspots that we have right now, let's look at them. We have our big sunspots right here. This guy formed on the Earth-facing side, as well as this one here. It was originally like over here though, but this guy formed on the Earth-facing side about a month ago now. And then it rotated off, but it didn't do anything on Earth-facing a month ago, like, you know, early, mid-October. It wasn't really doing anything. The moment we had the alignment with 3i Atlas, the superior conjunction, so 3i Atlas, Sun, Earth on the 21st, boom, we started getting big solar storms launching off from this one, and then it rotated all the way through after having a huge period of solar activity. That has continued now with multiple X-class flares, high M-class flares, and it hasn't stopped. So there is a very strong connection in time between all these things, and what we track on the channel is we see that happen time and time again. So you can't just keep stacking coincidences up and say that they're coincidence. Because if you get a tall enough tower, it's like that just can't be coincidence anymore. There's something to this. And we have a tower that's like, it's a Jenga tower going up to the Empire State Building. It's crazy. We've been tracking this for a while now, and they just keep lining up. And we've been forecasting this. I forecasted that there was going to be very likely enhanced solar activity due to the superior conjunction of 3i Atlas through the perihelion back in July, actually just a few days before that magnitude 8.8 megaquake. And then 2.5 months later, that's what we saw. And now it's continuing, and now it's Earth facing. And now we're seeing really anomalous activity off the coast of Japan and more solar storm impacts. Here we have NOAA's space weather model that does not take into account this new wave from the 1.2 X-class flare. So we see two waves right here with their model. Here's 2 spikes in the plasma density. Now we have to add a third in. They're probably going to update this model within a few hours. I don't think it's up to date right now. I can check right now to see if it's updated as I've been doing this live stream, but I don't think, no, they haven't updated it. So we actually have 1, 2, 3 waves. The first one was expected to come in today on the 10th, early in the morning Universal Time. That has not happened, but they also kind of show us like slipping through the gaps. Maybe it's still coming in. The second wave is from the 1.7 X-class flare yesterday. That is more definitive and a surefire hit. That is coming in on the 12th, according to them, or late on the 11th, universal time. And then this new one is coming in, and that NASA model shows it coming in around 6 a.m. on the 12th. So I think we're going to get a sandwich effect, and that's why I think we're likely to have G3 storming. So we have this anomalous earthquake swarm in Japan. We have this planetary alignment that's coming up. And one other thing that's interesting to note is before the Great Tohoku Earthquake, on the 9th, we had a 2.2 X-class flare. And well, yesterday is when we had the magnitude 6.8 and 6.4 earthquakes in Japan. That's when we had the 1.7 X-class flare. So they're nearly exactly identical. That 2.2 X-class flare on March 9th, 2011 was exactly from Earth direct. I mean, some really wild synchronicities are occurring right now. And we also have some more too. If we look here really quick, check this out. Here is the astrological chart for the Great Tohoku Earthquake, and I'm not doing an interpretation on this. I just want you to look at one thing, okay? We want to see where the position of the planets and their relation to each other is in the sky. And here we see the moon right there at 0 degrees, the cusp of Gemini and Taurus, okay? So that's exactly where the moon was when that earthquake ruptured. It was at the very end of Taurus, beginning of Gemini, okay? So this is the signs, not the constellations. We'll look at constellations soon, but we're just using this to get a specific degree point. You'll also notice that we have Mercury and Uranus less than 3 degrees conjunct. So we have Mercury and Uranus there nearly conjunct, and we have the moon at that location. Now if we go over here to our true sky map, let's actually switch this back to tropical just so we can look at those degree points. I don't care about the signs right now. This isn't about the signs. We see that this is set for the new moon when we have this planetary alignment. Look at where Uranus is. It's at the cusp of Taurus and Gemini. So where the moon was for the Great Tohoku Earthquake now is where Uranus is, and it's in opposition with Mercury, and the moon is in opposition. So this is a moon opposition to that Great Tohoku Earthquake moon location, and it's also now the moon's on that point. The moon being related to tidal forces, being related to the people, being related to earthquakes and more. You know, earthquakes vary with the lunar cycle. And then we get Mercury here now in this opposition to Uranus. So it's really quite striking, the synchronicity and the exact alignments between these. Now if we go here, let's switch this back to our true sky position, which is our actual constellations in the sky. We'll check this out. Here we go. And so we see this is our sun, moon, and Mercury, all less than 1 degree apart. Actually, it's only like 15 arc minutes apart from each other. And then Uranus there is less than 2 degrees off from that. So nearly exact alignment here. I have this set for Tokyo, Japan at the exact time of this alignment. But this could happen at any time if there is a big earthquake or something. Like, we don't know, but it's very, very, very reminiscent right now. And the activity is almost identical. But the reason I'm showing you this chart is to show you those angles. So this is the alignment, right? There's that alignment there. Look at this configuration that we also have. This right here is trine to Jupiter, which is trine to Saturn and Neptune. So we have this also harmonic trine configuration, and here are those sextile configurations there. And then Jupiter is in a fairly close opposition to Pluto. It's within 10 degrees. I think it's at like 6 degrees off. Maybe it's a little bit further off than that, but that's it's still marked as an opposition. So we have this really incredible planetary geometry coming into effect on November 19th and 20th. Mercury being the activator. It's going to sweep through like this. So really incredible stuff happening there, and we hope that nothing happens, but we just really can't be sure. Now, the other thing I just want to show you quickly is that Comet C 2025 T1 Atlas. Here's the brightness increase on it, okay? So it was down at about 16.5 right here. This is mid-October. Now we're approaching mid-November. In less than a month, it has increased 250 times in brightness. So it's completely defied its expected light curve. And if we reset everything, we see that it was well under expectations and now it is above expectations. And so it's really getting bright. It's perihelion again on the 2nd of December. Today exactly in that Sun-Earth alignment, though it is well above the ecliptic plane. It just had a solar storm launch out towards it. Here we have our proton flux showing that we're in this S1 proton radiation storm right here. So we see that we had that 1.2 X-class flare. Immediately our proton flux at greater than 10 megaelectron volt levels increased to over the S1 threshold. This is another factor that's influencing the global electric circuit, charging it up. We see that our greater than 50 megaelectron volt protons have gone up as well. Normal values are about 0.15 to 0.2. This is being measured at geosynchronous orbit, 5.6 Earth radii out from the planet. And well, if we look now, we're at 22 for our for our greater than 10 megaelectron volt flux. So 0.2 to 22, that's a big increase, right? We're talking 2 orders of magnitude. So it's a 100-time increase in the amount of energetic particles coming in that are 10 megaelectron volts or greater in their energy. That is, I believe, everything that's happening. Basically, here we have our sunspots, and we see that we hit this bottom right there, went down to about 20, then we've leapt up now to over 160. So that's the sort of rebound that you can have after these really big dips. You get, right now, solar flux effectively is really concentrated in those sunspots. So when they went off the Earth-facing side, sunspot numbers plummeted, and then when they rotated back, boom. So that's the other thing. Each sunspot is a concentration of magnetic flux on the sun. So let's look at this guy, because this thing is really quite crazy. This is a pretty significant sunspot. The magnetic field strength here is on the order of thousands of Gauss, whereas Earth's magnetic field, for reference, is 0.23 to 67 Gauss, roughly. So thousands of Gauss. And they form these twisting magnetic vortices. And think that that doesn't affect what's directly in front of it. Well, it does. So we have this massive sunspot, many times the size of the Earth. If you were to put the Earth there, it's probably about that big. Maybe a little bit bigger. Maybe it's more like that size. The Earth is not big in this comparison, okay? This is many times bigger than the Earth, because look how big it is on the sun. So you have this massive field of magnetic flux directly in front of the Earth with its magnetic field, and the electromagnetic force, again, 10 to the 36 times more powerful than gravity. So that's also twisting and churning everything. The interplanetary magnetic field in between, the electric field, everything is being topsy-turvy and turned around and churned up and twisted and fluxed as a result of this. And so that is quite significant. We have geomagnetic storms soon to hit us because of these waves of plasma from the X-class flares. We can look at that really quick. Here's our 2 X-class flares right here. And as a result, we're going to have enhanced geomagnetic volatility. So everything is looking prime for there to be something big to happen as it relates to a geologic event. And that's why Japan is looking so troubling, because it's showing exactly the sort of seismic activity that is kind of necessary for there to be a big earthquake. That's the zone of highest seismic risk. If I had to give a forecast just like I did 3 days before, the magnitude 8.8 in Russia, this right now, by far, is the zone of highest seismic risk on the planet. Does that mean that it's going to be the location where we get the next big earthquake? Maybe not. Maybe the next magnitude 7 or greater is somewhere else. But if I had to create a list and put them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this would be number 1, and it'd be number 1 by far. Number 2 would probably be up here, because we've been continuing to get foreshock or weird swarm activity here, though that doesn't show in the past few days, but over the past few months, if you look at the data, you'll see that. And I would put down here as number 3, because this also looks like it's kind of building up to something. But of course, there's plenty of locations. We've been having some earthquake activity in Turkey here, as you can see. So this is also a spot to watch. Afghanistan is another spot to watch. There's been a lot of earthquake activity in Afghanistan that's been a bit troubling, especially near Kabul and Jalalabad here. So there are other places that are looking quite prime. And we have zones also like New Zealand where the Alpine Fault is at its recurrence interval of about 300 years. Last big earthquake there, magnitude 8 or so, was 1717. And well, it hasn't done a big magnitude 8 now for a while. So that's also looking prime, but that could be 50 years out. We don't know. Same with, for example, the west coast of the United States. The Hayward Fault, San Andreas Fault, they're pretty much ready to go, but we don't know when. The Cascadia Fault, same deal, but they're not showing that active foreshock activity like we're seeing in Japan. So that's why I'm really concerned about Japan right now. So please say your prayers for Japan because they just had that magnitude 9.1 and it looks like something big is gearing up again. And we have all these factors converging. So I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much for watching. Please smash that like button, help this channel grow. Subscribe if you like to stay up to date with what is happening with the Earth energetically. I release videos almost daily, exactly like this. We look at the Earth, earthquakes, volcanic activity, energetic changes, geomagnetic storming, solar activity, space weather, solar flares, solar storms, planetary alignments, the geometry of them, planetary resonances, and these other factors like comets, interstellar forces, cosmic, and more. So if you like the sound of that, hope to see you here. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. Say your prayers for Japan because this is looking really concerning. Potentially something big happening in just hours to days. We don't know. We hope I am wrong. I really hope I'm wrong here. And well, I'm not saying it's going to. I'm giving you a probability that this is much more likely than normal. That's the thing. It's not a yes or no. We have a much higher probability now of there being something big to occur because of all these factors. That's what it boils down to. And well, we just hope that that probability isn't the one that comes up on the bingo card. So I'll see you all very, very soon. Thanks for watching and have a great day.